on the news media to thank you. The meeting is being recorded. All right, so I just want to thank all the media who have helped get the word out about this important issue. All right, how do we get here? I am going to go through a list of a timeline that tells you about some of the things that have happened. In 2018, the Chicago Rockford International Airport and Federal Aviation Administration conducted an environmental assessment of the midfield air cargo development area, including Balboa Prairie. And in 2019, the EA, or the environmental assessment, was finalized, and a finding of no significant impact was issued despite the proposed destruction of a high-quality state-recognized prairie and multiple threatened and endangered species. Natural Land Institute, a nonprofit organization, we've managed that prairie for decades. We weren't notified of the draft or the final EA. Fast forward to summer of this past summer, 2021, construction work began. It included grading, stormwater detention, installation, and access road construction. In August of this past summer, 2021, local residents noticed grading work and notified NLI and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources about this. And then a DNR biologist discovered the federally endangered rusty patch bumblebee, not just one, but several on the site. And then the DNR asked the airport to consider redesigning the expansion plan to avoid impacts to the high quality natural areas and endangered species. In September, Mississippi Audubon, NLI, and others began seeking all alternative measures to avoid impact to the prairie, including political, public, and legal options. Conservation advocates are informed of the issue and formed the Save Balboa Prairie Facebook group. They spoke out in an airport board meeting, sent emails, and made calls asking for a redesign of the expansion to spare the prairie area. Advocates spread the word and reached out to the press and lawmakers. A temporary hold on construction activities until November 1st was placed due to the discovery of the endangered bee. And construction activities continued outside of the INAI prairie footprint. And INAI, oh, somebody is not on mute. Can you please put yourself on mute? Okay, thank you. So I was just saying that the construction activities continued on the prairie during September outside of the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory site, which was a portion of between 4 and 5 acres at the prairie, and in areas of the endangered bee likely used for foraging. In October, public pressure began mounting and the grassroots movement around the Save Balboa Prairie issue grew. And regional and international organizations such as the Illinois Environmental Council, Sierra Club, Exercise Society, Natural Resources Defense Council, Earth Justice, and the National Wildlife Federation spoke out about the destruction of the prairie. The airport canceled their planning and finance meeting scheduled for October 21st, and a whole lot was written about the call to save Balboa Prairie during October and early November. On October 26th, the airport board canceled their public board meeting planned for October 28th. Also on that day, the Natural Land Institute filed a lawsuit for injunctive relief to temporarily halt the bulldozers from destroying the prairie, with the intent to allow time for the adoption of an alternative project design that preserved the prairie and for additional environmental assessment. On October 28th, advocates held an event at the airport at the time of the previously scheduled board meeting to gather and celebrate the prairie and bee. During this event, the airport released a statement indicating that Federal Aviation Administration is reinitiating consultation under the Endangered Species Act with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to evaluate impacts to the rusty patch bumblebee. So construction initially scheduled for November 1st was suspended until further federal consultation was completed or will be completed. On November 9th, airport staff continued to refuse to collaborate with local experts on a redesign of the expansion, and they stated that they plan to construct the road through the prairie as originally designed, as it's part of the future expansion south of this area. And just a note that any airport expansion plans at or south of Cessna Drive have not undergone any environmental assessment or public review process in recent history. And on November 16th, Governor Pritzker visited Rockford Airport to announce funding for aviation workforce training. And when asked about Balboa Prairie, he said, "I really believe that as we fight for our climate, our environment, as we protect our environment, that we can also do so while creating jobs that we don't need to have a trade-off here." So then on November 18th, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources wrote a consultation letter to the Federal Aviation Administration, and the airport held their first public board meeting in 2 months. Several conservationists spoke during the public comment period. And then on November 19th, the next day, attorneys for Natural Land Institute filed a 60-day notice of violations of the Endangered Species Act to federal agencies. On December 1st, IDOT, Illinois Department of Transportation, announced that Rockford Airport was awarded $3.6 million in Rebuild Illinois Airport Capital Improvement Program funds to construct the airport midfield entrance road and utility corridor. Now, since our last meeting on December 7th, we had Balboa Prairie advocates attend the airport board meeting on December 16th. Several people attended. We had 3 speakers speak during the public comment period. And then the next day on December 17th, the airport filed a motion to dismiss, stating that NLI doesn't have standing to file the lawsuit and the land is owned by the airport authority, the motion stated, and is not a public park or otherwise accessible to the public. As such, Natural Land Institute has no right to be on the property and thus can claim no injury resulting from the development of the land. Also, on that same day, IEC and other planners, organizers, Save Balboa Prairie organizers provided a new action alert urging elected officials to use their influence to publicly advocate for a consensus solution. State and federal partner agencies can work with the airport to use this new Rebuild Illinois funding to commission and execute a redesigned plan that spares the prairie. So there's been a lot going on over the last 4 months, and we continue to do work in the community and behind the scenes to try to save this prairie. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Dahl, who's the Executive Director of Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves. Amy?
Thanks, Kim. I'm just going to give a little bit of an update about where things are with the legal process and some of the agency updates. And Kim covered a lot of it, but back in the fall, there was a complaint filed for injunctive relief, but that motion for the temporary restraining order was filed, but also withdrawn. The airport has denied any request to mark Balboa Prairie, give any monitoring access to Balboa Prairie, and most importantly, they've denied any request to have a meeting with any consultants or from anybody advocating for saving the prairie. So there was also in that notification an intent to sue the federal agencies for Endangered Species Act violations, but then following that, as Kim just reported, the airport has filed their motion to dismiss, saying that that NLI doesn't have standing.
A lot of that went forward, resulting in some relief from the sub-zero wind chill values that we've had the last several days. So for tonight, only down to 28. I say only because last night, again, we were down to about 4.
So there are a few upcoming dates for what's going on with the legal process. So because the airport has filed their motion to dismiss, NLI has a deadline of January 19th to respond. The federal defendants still have not responded. Jill, you can go to the next slide. The federal defendants still haven't responded to the complaint, and they have until the end of this month to do so. February 2nd, the airport needs to supply documents in support of their motion to dismiss, and that's when that is due. February 17th, there'll be an initial court status conference. And the date to know is at the beginning of March, the airport's agreement to stop construction ends, absent any further agreement or court order. So just a reminder of kind of the timeline that we were on when we were working in the fall. We had a deadline at the beginning of November. Now we're looking at a deadline of beginning of March. And something to note also is that deadline, they've also said that they've reopened consultation, and we do have confirmation from Fish and Wildlife Service that consultation has been reopened. But this isn't the time of year that monitoring or looking for the rescue patch bumblebee would be effective. So that's something to note. The process right now is that the next steps and what's still happening. NLI and other agencies are continuing to press the federal and state agencies to get information through the Freedom of Information Act. NLI is prepared, and their legal team are prepared to file another temporary restraining order if there's any sign that the airport is moving on construction, and they are preparing to amend the complaint to add the Endangered Species Act claim after the 60-day notice period ends. So those are the updates on the legal process and that aspect of the work to save Belleville Prairie. I also wanted to give a little bit of update about where things are with the state agencies that are kind of involved at least a little bit. And there've been some talk about what are agencies doing and what aren't they doing, and just wanted to let people know and explain a little bit about a couple of the agencies. So the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission is one of the agencies that has no power to do anything legally, because this land, Belleville Prairie, is not a dedicated nature preserve. But they do have an interest in this, of course, because the law that creates the nature preserve system is created by the Illinois Natural Areas Preservation Act, and Belleville Prairie is a natural area that many would love to make it a nature preserve. That's one of the goals that we've talked about. It is a voluntary program. The landowners it's a voluntary dedication. So the Nature Preserves Commission can't make it a nature preserve unless the land owning agency does it voluntarily. One of the other things to note is that this agency had been without a director for many, many years. They now have an executive director that just started this month for the first time since 2015. So that should give you some indication of how understaffed or underfunded this agency has been in the state. They do have another meeting. Their next meeting will be on January 25th. As with any other public agency, public comments are allowed, and there are a lot of DNR employees, state employees, consultants, and others in the conservation world that do come to these meetings, and so public comment is encouraged. If people are interested in providing public comment, let us know. And if there are those that might want to make public comment, we can coordinate messages. But this is one agency that they don't have any legal authority given to them by the state of Illinois to do anything about this. Another agency that I think has much interest in what's going on, but again has no legal standing or legal teeth to do anything, is the Endangered Species Protection Board, which was created in 1972, also has members appointed by the governor, but they don't have legal ability to do anything in this situation, but they do have the ability to advise IDNR and provide advice to IDNR. Another thing to note is that the Illinois Endangered Species Protection Board has had no paid staff since September of 2015. So when the budgets were cut, the staff was cut. They also have a meeting coming up, and their meeting is February 11th. And again, as a public agency and a public entity, when they have a public meeting, there is a process or the ability for the public to make comment. One other thing that we have recently been advised of is that the consultation rules for IDNR, which has been part of the process with Belleville Prairie, that these consultation rules are being revised. And there will be a public comment period when these rules are released before they are adopted, and it will likely be open this summer. So that's something that we hope that people will keep on their radar so that they can review those and make public comment. And this situation is a reminder to all of us that that government involvement at all levels, local, state, and federal, is important. And so, as conservationists, I think we all love to be working in our natural areas, but we need to remember that some of the decisions that affect conservation, preservation, and our environmental sustainability happen in boardrooms and in government offices. And there are ways for us to get involved and to be working on those things. So that is the update there. One other thing that we have learned about the consultation process. So we know that consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and FAA has been reopened based on the documents that we received through the FOIA request. It appears that this month they are working through the updated consultation with the FAA providing the biological assessment to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service by the end of the month. That we did receive report today from the Fish and Wildlife that just said consultation continues with the FAA, and that's all that we know at this point. Again, as we mentioned earlier, this isn't the right time of year to be studying the rusty patch bumblebee, so we hope that there will be some resolution on that that doesn't just skip over that. I wanted to give a quick update on monitoring as well. There are people in the local area that have been doing monitoring. So we put the link here if you want to sign up. I did communicate a little bit with Jessie, who'd been coordinating that at the local level. And she said, right now people aren't signing up, but there are people that are still going out and monitoring. So you can sign up to monitor, and Jessie's information is there as well if you need to make any alerts or any updates. She's been handling that. So those are kind of our updates. And we wanted to move on a little bit. When the airport made the decision at the end of October to halt construction and reopen the consultation process, many elected officials, local officials said, this is great. Now both sides can come to the table and work on a solution that is both good for economic development and the airport and also environmental sustainability, and that we can reach a compromise that works for all sides. And it was very shortly after that the Rockford Airport says that the roadway can't be redesigned to save the Prairie, and has not met with any of the advocates or had conversation with any of the advocates that are proposing that the Prairie be saved and that the road be redesigned. And so Paul Cicero, who is the chair of the Airport Authority, was invited to this meeting tonight, but he has put together on behalf of the airport some written statements that have been published in the airport, or excuse me, in local papers, but also in the Rockford Chamber magazine that called for that the airport is pursuing a thoughtful and committed path for the future. And there's some statements in that in his letter that we agree with. But also we wanted a chance to respond to many of those because we haven't been able to have that conversation with the airport. So we thought we would do it now, but also be able to provide those of you on this Zoom call with some information as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Domenico. And at this point, Matt, I think, is going to talk a little bit about some of those statements.
Amy?
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
This is Jenna Wiki. When you say consultation, does that have an official meaning?
It does have an official meaning. There are actually laws and administrative procedures that spell out the consultation process. It's a great question, and I've had it explained to me a couple of times. I would love it if somebody from U.S. Fish and Wildlife or the FAA would come on and explain the consultation process, but they have administrative rules and procedures that are written that talk about what the consultation process looks like and how they make a determination.
So both the FAA and the conservation state, federal organizations use that word?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, great.
Yes.
Had a little bit of a technical issue there, but if yeah, Jill, could you advance? Great, thanks. So as Amy said, there was a statement from Paul Cicero that was issued, and we would like the opportunity just to respond to some of those. Sorry for any background noise. So the Chicago Rockford Airport, or Chicago Rockford International Airport itself as a jewel, is something that Paul Cicero noted that we agree with. It is an asset to the county and the region. Development here will continue to be important to economic development in the region. But there are other statements that we disagree with, and we would like the opportunity to respond to those statements. So we were going to do that now. And so this statement here says that there have been decades of agreements with the expansion projects, that the runway has been planned for 40 years, and that the economic footprint for the benefit of the entire region has been planned out for decades, and the decades of previous boards underlay that current course. But in the 1994 airport documents, the expansion plan there states that the Greater Rockford Airport Authority will continue to maintain and the remaining 10.6 acres of high quality prairie in association with the Illinois Natural Lands Institute. And this shows that there have been decades of agreement that this high quality prairie is recognized by the airport authority, and that they wanted to collaborate with the Natural Lands Institute and other partners to care for the prairie. So next, Domenico is going to present some plans, including that 1994 proposal.
Okay, can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so I have a couple of slides here, but I want to focus on the road because we have to stop this thing right now. If they go through this, everything is over. And I know I said this before, but I made it much clearer in this slide. There's no reason for the road to go through the prairie. It can be easily realigned using the existing road that's east of the prairie and cutting through the parking lot, and they end up in the same area where they are here. This is where they want to go. They don't have to go here. They can come across, what is it? I forgot the name of this road.
Cessna.
Anyway, Cessna Road, and then they can come up to the already the road that's already existing, cut across the parking lot, and get to where they want to be. And any parking spaces that may lose here, they can easily accommodate in this area here, attached to the parking lot that's to the school. And I think this distance to this door is equal from that distance to that door. It's an equilateral triangle. So I don't think they should, and I don't think they have to. And it's easy as 1, 2, 3, right? 1, realign the road, upgrade existing road to accommodate truck traffic, and recuperate your parking stalls. There's no loss. In fact, they would save a lot of money, I think, because this will require much more substantial construction than just upgrading this and then making this small link here. Next slide. Okay, so what is it that they're after? And this is the question that we really have to ask. They mentioned this third runway. Where is the third runway and how can it function? Also, right now they have this whole complex right above the prairie here. If they just move it without changing anything, without changing any architectural features, they even get their employee parking and their truck yard. What they would have to lose are all the gravel bottom catch basins. And then that can be, and as we said, we already proposed that they should go to a more modern, more good technological solution of porous paving. And then all that runoff can actually be treated and actually we can create a geochemical runoff water treatment area in this area here. So it could all be accommodated. We can save the prairie. They can have their second expansion, which has already been designed. I'm putting future expansion here because I'm assuming that's why they want to put this road through here, is to make room for this expansion, but they can still have a fairly good expansion. What we have to do is ask them, what do they intend to do on this site? And in this plan, you can see we can save the whole prairie. We can recuperate the area that they've already trashed, but we can restore that, and we can make this into a park. And we can also have a visitor center, because birders go there, and why not have the public have a view? We can create a little small visitor center here that tells the story of the airport, tells the story of Camp Grant, tells the story of the indigenous connections to this land, and so forth. We can make it into a real sound project. And in this scenario, I put the runway here. Okay, next slide. You can move the next slide. Okay, this is the plan, the 1994 plan that we were talking about. As you can see here, oh no, go back one. Go back to the 1994 plan.
Yep, I had that up, Nico.
Oh, okay, here we go.
Mhm.
So as you can see here, where they had placed the runway, you can see it here, and it goes right to the railroad. Now this area is within the flood way, and all this is within the floodplain. All this development is within the floodplain. So we have to ask them if this is the plan that they mean that they have for 40 years. But in this plan, they show that the prairie is liberated from, well, it's liberated, but it's not saved because it would be completely enclosed. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, here, what I did was do an exercise. I took the length of the major runway and I tried to position it within the other areas of the site. There is nowhere on this site that they can place a length of runway that they have here. Now, the length of runways are very important. There's something called the V1 point when the airplane takes off. That's the point of no return. But you should have enough of a length that if the flight is aborted for any reason, the plane can stop safely. So length is very important. Also, it's also important because if you want to accommodate the larger aircrafts that people are using now for delivery, then you need that space. But I tried to put this runway any which way possible, and I couldn't fit it in without major destruction to other things. The other thing about runways, you would prefer to have an east-west alignation because you want the prevailing winds to help the aircraft take off, especially when we're dealing with heavy aircrafts. So you want the aircraft to go towards the wind when taking off so that the wind speed will lift it much safer. So given that, I wonder what the airport has in mind for the future, because the third runway, the only place I could see it safely is right here, 700 feet off this runway. Now, 700 feet is the minimum allowed by the FAA, the distance of the FAA. However, when you have runways this close, you cannot land the plane simultaneously. You would have to alternate the planes. So as one plane lands here, then you can have one come in on the side, but two planes cannot land simultaneously at this distance. You would need at least 1,400 feet or more to have proper double landings. So the question is, what is the future of this airport? what is Illinois getting with this project? And I think that my suspicion is that, and I sympathize with that. Now that I've been working on this site, I really sympathize with the engineers because there is no good solution on this site. This site has a lot of issues. We are dealing with a strange triangle kind of land that you have to sort of make this horseshoe kind of shape to your facilities. And as you can see here, there's no real good place to put a runway. So the question is, do we just proceed and develop this airport the way they're doing now with the haphazard kind of designs that are really forced into this area? The other concern is that there's a lot of concern now about PFAs, and they have not been addressed properly. The airports use PFAs, de-icing agents, and so forth. Now, the de-icing agents, they have come up with better ones. So, for example, if they use potassium acetate, it does not corrode, it does not pollute as much. But it's not as if when you put potassium acetate on the plane, you're going to get potassium acetate on the runoff, because as we can see with the rubber consumption and all the hydrocarbons from the fuels and so forth, the runoff is still going to be pretty bad. So they can claim that they are upgrading their chemicals, but in the end, you're still going to get a soup. And so the point is, why are we doing all this? Why are we smashing our heads against the wall, trying to fit everything here to make a state-of-the-art airport? And I think that's the fallacy that the airport authorities are running into. They really want to do everything on this site. Now, the airport here was developed because, and historically, it was the training facility for World War I and World War II soldiers. So they were training pilots here. And so the airport just got expanded, but it was never really planned for what we need today as a state-of-the-art cargo airport. So my suggestion would be, next slide, please. Next slide.
It just takes a second.
Oh, okay. So looking at the bigger picture, and I think this is one fallacy that I see in this project, unless I'm missing documents, that the airport authorities never looked beyond their own property. And if we look beyond, we can see that the Kishwaukee River is actually one of the better rivers in Illinois. If you can see the ratings here, there's only a few C's. Most of them are A and B quality. And these are the watersheds that feed into the Kishwaukee. And they're probably A-B quality. So we have a really rich aquatic community here in fairly good shape. And in the picture below, the green areas that I've demarcated here are actually parks and protected areas. And the Kishwaukee runs right along that. The only missing piece is the airport property. And this happens to be the most possible aquatic rich area because of the delta, because of the meeting of the two rivers. So I am proposing that as part of this, if we really want a state-of-the-art airport, cargo airport that will mean something to Illinois, that will liberate the airport authority from any floodplain engineering, that will liberate them from the Prairie, that will liberate them from having to try to fit this runway haphazardly and not necessarily in the best alignment with the prevailing winds, that we should do a land swap deal. that the airport would give up all land west of the Prairie, right to the river, and in return, they could get 3,000 acres, approximately 3,000 acres just south of that. And you can see there's an existing landfill there. There's landfills here. So there, and look at all the connections. Look at all the connections they can have to major roads, 251 and 72. By keeping it here, their only connection is Beltline. So Beltline is going to receive a lot of traffic, and if we're going to talk about moving cargo fast, you need a lot of options. So I think one of the possibilities here is to actually start over, to actually talk with the governor, talk with the feds, and saying, what is the point here? If we want a state-of-the-art airport that will rival the best in the world, we need to do it right. And in this case, they can have all the runways they want lengthwise and aligned from east to west, which is the best alignment that they can have. So they can have multiple uses here, which would multiply their capacity, any capacity that they can hope for here, and they don't have to destroy anything. We can actually have a connection. We can fit the connection to the corridor. We can make the Kishwaukee River the best quality river in the state. They can have better facilities, no problems engineering, freedom of engineering, freedom of design, and great connection. So that, I think that's what I'm heading. Now, I know they've spent a lot of money on this, but we're looking towards the future. We're looking to the future, and we have to ask, and the governor has to ask, and the feds have to ask, what is the end product here? Or do we want this mashup of pieces, or can we truly build a state-of-the-art airport with all the facilities that we need without any issues? Now, I know, next slide. Now, I know people are going to say, oh, but what about the displacement of the farmers, the farming community? Well, first of all, we have to find out who actually owns that land, because right now, the way farming is going, a lot of farmers are actually tenants. So we have to find out who actually owns that land. And as you can see here, just beside the area that I've shown, this land was appropriated for landfill. Look at all the landfill here. So it's not as if we're committing something terribly unusual. I drive around in my area, and there's a lot of housing developments going in. So I know it's a hard thing to do, to ask people, to move, but I think they can be compensated, and I think Illinois will get a better airport that will last for many more years, because this is not the last expansion that the Rockford Airport is going to ask. They're going to come back with more extensions, possibly filling in the whole floodplain. So I think now is the time that we can actually propose this before it's too late, to actually save the whole floodplain, save the riverine ecosystem, and get a good airport. That's all I have to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Nico. That was really informative and inspiring to see that, it's really great planning. Okay, so I want to continue to respond to some of the messages from from Paul Cicero. One of those was that summarized was that the airport followed the legal path correctly for expanding the airport, and the legal path included notification to the public and an environmental assessment. So the Bell Prairie advocates would like to respond to that by saying that the legal path included notifications to the public, but it did not include a notification to the Natural Land Institute and others, and that the environmental assessment that was not prepared by the airport has errors, which you can see in this next slide, Jill. Thank you. So as you can see here, just a couple things from the environmental assessment that are pretty easy to pull out and just digest is that the environmental assessment says that these rare state listed plants are not found at Bell Bowl Prairie from the one day survey, but they are. They have been documented since the environmental assessment. And then the environmental assessment also said that Bell Bowl Prairie is not a natural areas inventory site, but it is. It has been on the INAI. And the assessment also reported that the Bell Bowl Prairie's Floristic Quality Index, which is a key measure of ecosystem value based on the vegetation present there, was 29.3, which puts it in the sort of high vegetation quality area, but it's actually a 45.8, which is pretty rare in our state, really rare. It's kind of unheard of. And so that is a natural area quality designation, that floristic quality number there, that puts the site above many sites. It puts it at grade A. So the environmental assessment also said that the airport would enter into an agreement with the Winnebago County Forest Preserves to support the natural areas preservation, but it has not. And the environmental assessment also claimed that there is no way that this rare federally listed, the only plant that would be federally listed here is occurring at Bell Bowl Prairie, but this plant called Lespedeza Leptostakia is a very rare plant that is only really found at places like Bell Bowl Prairie, and another assessment or another survey just might find that if a qualified agency and individual or individuals are looking for that plant. And so that kind of biodiversity is very rare, and the importance of that being covered in the environmental assessment is the entire point of the environmental assessment. So our response to the EA there concludes. And Amy?
Thanks, Matt. A couple other things that were said in the article that millions have already been invested, made upon the development plan, and the current $50 million project is already 65% or more complete. It said the runways can't be moved, and our citizens want to move beyond being #1 in negative lists in national publications. But we would respond and share this at our last meeting as well, and have been sharing it on the website. There's $3.6 million available to the Rockford Airport for the Midfield Road construction in Rebuild Illinois funds. And the IDOT aeronautics staff have said that it can be used for a redesign. This is state money, and it cannot be used to pay for work that's already been done, but it can be used, according to IDOT officials, to pay for a redesign. So there's money that's already there. And to respond that the runways can't be moved, or that this can't be stopped because it's already 65% of the way completed. We'd point out that this isn't the first time. It's not unique. Endangered species stop construction projects on a regular basis, and we do that because we as citizens care about our endangered species, and once they're gone, they're gone. And we know that just a few months ago, more and more species have been listed as extinct. And if we don't stop construction projects when we know that there are habitats for endangered species there, then they will continue to become extinct. That's why they're endangered. And so this was just a quick search that we did that found several projects that were put on hold or were stopped or redesigned because they found endangered species and knew that protecting that habitat was important. So the response would be that this can be done and needs to be done, even if it's already 65% of the way completed. And I think Matt's going to talk a little bit more about a couple other statements that were made.
Yeah, there was a statement. Thanks, Amy, for that endangered species note there, because that's a really important point. There's a statement in the response from, or the statement from Mr. Cicero that says that the acreage of the airport was deeded in 1946 for aeronautical purposes. It is not a park or a nature preserve. And to respond to that, could you go to the next slide, Jill? Thanks. We pulled two quotes here that are pretty important in regards to this. So one is from the director of the Nature Preserve Commission, the agency that dedicates the highest quality land for protection under the Nature Preserves Act, Natural Areas Preservation Act. And this individual who chairs that committee said that it seems like there's little question that at least a portion of the prairie would qualify for nature preserve dedication, as it is of outstanding ecological quality. And this very small amount of acreage in the 36 million acres of Illinois qualifies to be a nature preserve. Currently, 115,000 acres are preserved in the nature preserve system, and that is 0.04% of the state. And so while we move into a century with greater care for the land and our relationship with it, that's a number that is likely to need to increase if we're going to achieve goals that relate to our health and public health regarding our relationship to the land. So the second quote here that I want to bring up in response to the not a park and not a nature preserve comment by Mr. Cicero is that the second quote is language from the Natural Areas Preservation Act itself, and why we have nature preserves in illustrating that. It is incorrect for Mr. Cicero to say that just because it is not a nature preserve, that it should not be valued as it is in its current state. And with so little left, this land is remarkably rare and important. The Act says that these lands are of value for scientific research, for teaching as reservoirs of natural materials, not all of the potential uses of which are now known. And then it says here in this slide that it is therefore the public policy of the state of Illinois to secure for the people of present and future generations the benefit of an enduring resource of natural areas. Destroying 5 of the 20 acres of the highest quality gravel prairie leaves even less of what is a very tiny fraction of its kind of natural resources that is left. And so finally, what I want to respond here with is that to the park, not a park and not a nature preserve, is that any public agency, this is written in the Act, or instrumentality of the state and its political subdivisions has the power and is urged to dedicate suitable areas or portions of areas within its holdings to continue holding them as nature preserves. And the airport authority has the power to preserve this precious resource, and the spirit of this Illinois law urges this public agency to do that. And so just to drive this point home here, next slide, Jill. The one with the table. Yeah, thank you. So to drive that final point home, yeah, so the airport might not be a conservation organization, but there are numerous, dozens of organizations across the state that are not conservation organizations that have both private and public who have preserved these lands, recognizing their obligation to protect biodiversity for the future. And many of these sites are odd shapes and in inconvenient places, but nonetheless, these organizations and many others protect them because they understand the value of the property as in the highest value at its natural state. It is also an acknowledgement of how little we have left and how remarkable these places are by preserving a little odder end here that escaped development remarkably. So through in response to the not a park, not a nature preserve, there are a lot of reasons to preserve it, even if it's not going to be accessible to the public. Many of the nature preserves in our state, over 600 of them in total, many of them are not accessible to the public because they're not, the spirit of the Nature Preserves Act is not exactly to provide a walking trail for people or a birding spot. It oftentimes overlaps with that, but the nature preserve system recognizes land that is of outstanding ecological quality and is very rare. So like I said, 115,000 acres of our 36 million acre state.
Thanks, Matt, for reviewing all of those points with us. Really helpful information. So we're nearing the end of the presentation. We're going to talk about some action items and some other things that you can take home with you to continue working on the effort to save Belleville Prairie. I'm going to post a link right now in the chat to the Save Belleville Prairie website and the list of action items that we have there, and those have been updated recently. The most important thing that you can be doing right now is writing letters to elected officials and making phone calls. And we've tried to make it really easy for you to pick up the phone and pick up a pen and write a letter. So on the website right now, we have call scripts and letter templates. So you can go on the website and see everything that you need to contact Governor Pritzker, Senators Duckworth and Durbin, and local officials and really everyone. So there's people that we're prioritizing trying to contact. Those people are Governor Pritzker and Senators Duckworth and Durbin. But there's also contact information for everybody else who's involved with or related to Belleville Prairie. If you want to review that information, it's on the website as well. And there are other talking points. All the information that we've discussed here is on the website. So if there's more that you want to review before you make a statement and make a call or write a letter, it's all on the website. And now I think Laura is going to talk about the teacher kit.
Hi, everybody. It's great that you're all sticking with this and paying excellent attention right now. So if you could go to the next slide, and I will just real quickly go over the teacher kit. And also I want to just say that this doesn't have to be a classroom teacher kit. I can imagine some of these resources being used with community groups. Maybe you want to like have a meeting at your library, at your church, to just teach people about what's going on. So we're putting a few resources together so that you could do something like that. So first of all, there is a curriculum, a couple different options for that. If you know any teachers who would be interested in teaching about the Rusty Patch Bumblebee, I have access to an amazing curriculum that is just a couple weeks long, and it goes over, it has the kids look at real data and develop a model for how the Rusty Patch Bumblebee lives. And the idea behind the development of this curriculum was that the Rusty Patch Bumblebee is a charismatic invertebrate. And it really is. And by the end of teaching this curriculum, the kids love bumblebees. And I teach 8th grade. I teach the most cynical children on the planet, that age. And they enjoy this curriculum and learning about bees and learning about native bees. So I would recommend that. We're doing a free curriculum training on that. So if you know any teachers, if you have anybody who at all would be interested, we're doing that kind of curriculum training on February 12th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. The teachers will get ISB credits. I can imagine that any teacher right now is like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I'm going to do another thing on a Saturday when I need a day off. But if you have anyone who feels passionate about this, please let them know that's happening. We'll also have in this teacher kit, we'll have a science of bees and prairies for high school. We will also have kind of a whole bunch of things that students can do for social action. I've had students make artwork on postcards and send that in. We have really short tidbits of information, and the kids are very, very good at, I've had kids make posters, I've had kids make signs, and they send that into the different elected officials. And again, a lot of those graphics can be very inspiring for the kids. So maybe they can't write a long letter, but they can do a really beautiful piece of art and send that in. So all of these things are really great ways of reaching out to the community. Also, I would just say one other thing. Last year, when my daughter was home, kind of taking a gap year, she started this thing called Make Activism Part of Your Life. And she would just have a Zoom meeting with her friends every other Sunday night. And one of them would do a little presentation on an issue, and then they'd spend 15 minutes writing emails and making phone calls together. And the whole thing usually took about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But it was a really great way for them to see each other on Zoom, right? When we were all under really strict quarantine, but it was also a really great way to do some activism. So I would encourage anybody who is looking for a way to make an impact, get your neighbors together, get your church group together, get your book club together, take your friends out for a glass of wine and hand them some postcards and have them fill them out. And that's a really great way to get some of this stuff done and reach out to more community members. And we will have this teacher kit available for you probably after this weekend. And you can look on that for and send it out to any teachers you know. Send us emails with any teachers who you think might want to be contacted about this. And take a note on that website link right there for any information about the curriculum workshop.
Thanks, Laura. That is such a great resource. And you also sort of just covered the other content on this slide. So in addition to what I was just talking about with regard to calling and writing letters, just keep talking to people that you know about this issue, about saving Belleville Prairie. If you have any contacts in government or local politics, now's the time to ask them to do something, but you can also just get together with your friends or family and tell them to write a letter or make a phone call too. We really need as much vocalization on this right now as we can get. And another good time to do that, it will be during the next airport board meeting, which is in just a couple weeks. So put that date on your calendar, January 27th. This will be the next opportunity to sort of see what the airport board has to say about this and to be able to talk with them and have people present. And I think we're on the last slide. Yeah, so like I was just saying, we need voices now. We can't wait any longer. We can't wait until February to take action on this. Every day March 1st comes sooner. And we know that the bulldozers are ready to destroy the prairie. So we need to be working as much as we can now to make sure that that doesn't happen and they never have to turn the key on the bulldozer. So if anyone has any other ideas, feel free to share them in the chat and talk about where you feel like you'll be able to help. And reach out to, I guess, any of the people who are presenting or message us if you want to get involved in other ways. And that's it. I don't know if anyone else has anything else that they want to say. We're at the end.
Okay, Katie, thank you. I think that I'm going to start with comments and turn it over to actually Representative West wanted to make some comments. So first I'm going to turn it over to him, and then I've made a list of some people that have made comments or questions in the chat, and we'll go try to get through the chat comments and questions after Representative West speaks. So go ahead, Representative West. Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I want to thank you for the invite. I want to also thank you all for your advocacy. I'll be super brief. I want to thank you for your advocacy and let you know that all of you who have reached out to me, I hear you and I've read your comments, and I've talked with my staff on what can be done. Also, as many of you know, my wife is on the board for the airport, and I talked with her before coming on here, and she told me to thank you all for not just your advocacy and reaching out, but your courtesy. As you can imagine, at least for me, a lot of negative advocacy. Do this or we will do this to you, that kind of thing. And it's been a joy just listening to you. I don't comment on Facebook because it could ruin my day on some people, so I just don't comment at all. But I wanted to also let you know that my one thing I want you to keep the fight going. One thing that I am nervous about myself is there's a difference between policy making and administrative rules. After talking to my wife, she said that none of this decision was not made by the board. It was an administrative rule made by the staff that runs the airport, not the board that governs. I wish that there was more to what you were saying by the board president. I'm not coming here on the behalf of them, but I just want to make sure you know that I took a lot of notes today because I really want to know what you guys are thinking this time around in 2022. But also, when it comes to your action, my wife told me to tell you, call her cell. So if you have, and because she wants to respond to you. Now, of course, if it's 500 of you who call, that might be a little bit hard, but her number is 630-202-1766. I'll say it again. My wife is on the commission for the airport, Leslie West, 630-202-1766. She can give you more information on what's going on at the airport. I did send a letter back in October when the board meeting was canceled. I did send a letter saying that this should not have happened. The board meeting should not have been canceled. You need to hear these advocates out. And I'm hoping that a lot of progress can be made between now and March. So thanks again for having me. And I hope that you guys have all in good health and have a happy new year.
Thank you so much, Representative West. I really appreciate your comments. I know everyone else does too. It's great to hear your point of view, and even your wife as a commissioner and her point of view. So thank you. Thank you for sharing her cell phone number too. Not
no problem.
Everybody bombard her, especially tonight. All right, next we're going to go to Elizabeth Neal. She asked to make some comments earlier. Do you still want to talk?
Hi, Kim. Actually, I shouldn't really talk because Samantha answered all my questions.
Oh,
and
okay.
My questions were about following up with the consultations and public comment. So I don't want to burn up time that perhaps other people need.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, so everyone, look in your chat box if you haven't already at all the different questions and comments, and see if there's anything that you had a question about. Maybe it's already been answered. And Hillary G had a question, and I'm wondering if her question has been answered. I'm trying to find. Hillary, did you want to make a comment or ask a question?
Hi, it was, thanks so much. I wasn't sure at the beginning, it sounded like there hadn't been environmental assessments or no recent ones. But then there was a follow-up with a slide that did discuss some type of environmental assessment.
There was an environmental assessment in 2018, and then does somebody else on our committee want to answer her question about a more recent one? I think they're in the process of doing another one. Amy, do you want to comment on that?
Well, they've reopened consultation, but it doesn't necessarily mean there'll be any additional environmental assessment or any further visits to the site to make their decisions. But the most recent was done in 2019.
This is Jerry Paulson. The environmental assessment that was done was very shoddy, and there was no public input, even though they published a notice. No one was aware of it and no one came to the public meeting. It was done in order just to meet the minimum requirements for environmental assessments. And federal agencies did not do a complete assessment at that time. And of course, they didn't know about the bumblebee. And as it was listed in the slides, they got a lot of things wrong in the assessment. And that's part of the basis of why we're challenging the whole environmental assessment process. It's hard to reopen that process that's dictated by federal law.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Maybe you know the answer to this question too, or maybe somebody else does. Karen McGee had a comment and question. Since 6 acres of the prairie has already been bulldozed, has the RFD Airport Board already violated the Endangered Species Act and be subject to penalties from those acts?
Well, I think the part that's been bulldozed is not the prairie. It's the so-called Bell Bull Amphitheater, which is a historic site, but it was not part of the natural area inventory Prairie.
Okay, thank you. Just a note while I'm thinking about it, there are links in the chat to the Endangered Species Protection Board, information about them and the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission, and also a link to sign up for monitoring the prairie also is in there. And I know, I think it was Katie that put the savebebbleprairie.org website link in there as well. And Tom Berg had a comment and question, aren't airplanes taking off from RFD cargo planes that make up the vast majority, typically leaving empty? And Zach responded, and I'm hoping that maybe he answered your question. I mean, at the last board meeting we went to in December, the presentation that they had, the airport talked about shipping in billions of pounds based on their in a report that they had. But they didn't distinguish between inbound or outgoing. So Zach said you have to assume there more comes in than goes out. So I don't think that, based on my perception of all the news that I've heard, I don't think they have cargo planes leaving that are empty. I don't know if anyone else has a response to that or not. Anybody want to respond to that? Okay, so I don't know, are there any other questions or comments that I've missed in chat that maybe somebody had a question now?
To pytanie mam do ciebie. Jeśli będziesz szukał Tereskę spać, ona będzie płakać, ja o 9:00 moje
Okay, thanks. I wasn't sure if you were talking to us or someone else. Let's see. Chicago Audubon Society wants to know how they can help and coordinate messaging. So Sarah, I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and you can send me your email address so I can send you information about coordinating messaging. But also you can look at the Save Bebble Prairie website, savebebbleprairie.org, to look at the different action items and talking points that they have there that Katie talked about.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I know I'm looking at a comment from Cassie. The 2013 master plan called for a third runway south of Cessna and Beltline running southwest northeast, as well as land acquisition to the east of the airport. But she said she hasn't seen an environmental assessment for that project or area. They claim the access road is part of those future plans. And Samantha said, Cassie makes a good point that the entirety of the plan project has not been evaluated, but should be included in any environmental analysis that requires the consideration of cumulative effects. So thank you for sharing that information, Cassie and Samantha.
I'd like to just add, this is Jerry Paulson. We were going through the old files last week, and those runway plans have changed like every 5 years. And so we have not been able to get the current plan. I don't think anybody's actually seen it. That's part of the problem.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. I know there was a question earlier about the next airport board meeting. Is it by Zoom or in person? It's in person. It's at 5 p.m. at 60 Airport Drive in the auditorium at Rockford Airport. And just to note that it's not the airport terminal, it's a separate building to, I think it's the west or south of the airport terminal, but Google or, Google Maps 60 Airport Drive, and you'll see the Greater Rockford Airport Authority entrance. And that's where you can go in if you arrive early to get to the auditorium. And then, are there any other comments or questions before we adjourn? Okay, just a reminder that the next public meeting that we're going to host is Tuesday, February 8th at 6 p.m. by Zoom. I want to thank everybody who talked tonight and gave a presentation. Domenico, your presentation was really interesting and inspiring, and Amy, your comments were really great, and Matt and Katie and Laura, you all did a great job. So thank you so much for sharing all that interesting and inspiring and information. And
Yeah, Kim, can I ask a question?
sure.
Does anybody know how to get the maps of land ownership in the area?
I can't answer the question. Can anybody else?
It's all online through the Winnebago.
That's Ogle County. I put the link in earlier, the Ogle County
That's right, it's Ogle
Treasurer's
County.
Office.
Ogle
And just put
County?
in put the address in and, reveal who owns it and what the taxes are. Check the chat window.
Yeah, I see Zach put in a link to something.
Okay.
So we'll post the recording of this Zoom meeting tomorrow on the Facebook group, and then later in the day it'll be posted to the Belleville Prairie, SaveBellevillePrairie.org website.
This is Tom. I just put it in there again, the link.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
It's
And
Ogle
then
County.
for chat links, we're saving the chat, but we don't post that online. So maybe, I don't know, I'll talk to Amy and Jill and see what the best way to put some of these links. Maybe we can just put some of the links in the Facebook group or on the website for the information that people are asking about. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And please definitely take a look at the SaveBellevillePrairie.org website for talking point ideas and action items that you can do. And then Laura has the curriculum training on February 12th. That sounds really interesting too, Laura. Thank you for putting that together. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting, Kim.
Oh, you're welcome.